This week's title for our Bible study is still Celebrating God, and the title might have is Praise by Expecting and Following. And the Bible reading is about one of my favourite characters. It's about Bartimaeus and his meeting with Jesus. So this is Mark 10, verses 46 to 52. Then they came to Jericho. As Jesus and his disciples, together with a large crowd, were leaving the city, a blind man, Bartimaeus, which means son of Timaeus, was sitting by the roadside begging. When he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." Many rebuked him and told him to be quiet, but he shouted all the more, "Son of David, have mercy on me." Jesus stopped and said, "Call him." So they called to the blind man, "Cheer up, on your feet, he's calling you." Throwing his cloak aside, he jumped to his feet and came to Jesus. "What do you want me to do for you?" Jesus asked him. The blind man said, "Rabbi, I want to see." "Go," said Jesus, "your faith has healed you." Immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus along the road. Lovely story. All of those sorts of miracle stories are really lovely ones to think about. I wonder if I asked you if you could define mercy. I wonder what definition you would have for it. Maybe we can think of a few definitions in a little while. But mercy is something that is not earned. It's freely given without compulsion. We may ask for mercy, but true mercy is not compelled. It's always granted. And you can see that in this story, that is the mercy of Jesus, which he extends to Bartimaeus and he extends to us as well. Blindness was a familiar condition and problem in the ancient world. There were no real remedies for it. There is a book that's put about from the Egyptians, and they had all sorts of ideas about different potions that might help, but generally speaking, there was no medical answer to blindness. Sadly, many people believe that blindness was a curse from God for some type of sinful behaviour. So in John 9, we have the sins of the parents who are thought to have affected their children, causing them to be born blind. Blindness in the time of Jesus was economically and socially debilitating. Blind men couldn't serve as priests according to Leviticus. If you were blind, you had little opportunity to work, and you were generally reduced to begging or depending on other family members to survive. The Jewish law actually forbids taking advantage of a blind person, but it was altogether a bad place to be. So Jesus is on his way to Jerusalem. It's his final journey towards Jerusalem, and he comes to Jericho. Jericho is a really popular place in the Bible. It shows up a few times in the New Testament, but also it's very much more mentioned in the Old Testament. We all know the story of the walls coming tumbling down, and Jericho had quite a long time of being in ruins. And then it was rebuilt by a king. This king was a king called Hiel. You'll find him in 1 Kings 16. And because there had been a curse put on it about rebuilding it, his first son and his youngest son both died as a result of his rebuilding Jericho. Anyway, that's just an aside. So it's as they're leaving the city in a large crowd. There were many pilgrims going down to Jerusalem for Passover. The large crowd, and they walk past Bartimaeus, who's sitting by the roadside begging. Now Bartimaeus has heard about Jesus, and he calls him Jesus of Nazareth, and he calls him Jesus, Son of David, rather than Jesus of Nazareth. So he gives him a messianic term. I don't know what Bartimaeus had heard about Jesus, but he obviously believed that there was hope that Jesus might cure him. So he shouts out and says, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. People just rebuked him and told him to be quiet. When they did this, he shouted all the more, Son of David, have mercy on me. Some people in the crowd no doubt thought that he was rude or aggressive, socially not very aware. But I think he was just desperate for Jesus to see him and to take notice of him and hopefully to heal him. So Jesus stops and said, call him. So they said to the blind man, cheer up. The crowd's reaction changed towards Bartimaeus with these words of Jesus. The Greek that's translated cheer up occurs 7 times in the New Testament, and it always has this idea of boldness in terms of doing something. To cheer up is to be bold and take some action. So he tells him to get on his feet. So he's seated or lying by the side of the road begging. His cry to Jesus must have been very loud indeed. It's this huge crowd of people, and now all stood up, and Bartimaeus is sat down or lay down. How on earth did that happen, that Jesus managed to hear him? So he comes to Jesus, throwing his cloak aside, and Jesus makes him whole. And it's interesting, Jesus says to him, what do you want me to do for you? And the man says, Rabbi, I want to see. It's a very straightforward answer. He would no longer be an object of pity. He'd no longer be begging. He'd no longer be dependent on others. It was a whole way of having a new life that Jesus could give him. And so Jesus heals him and says, go, your faith has healed you. So away he goes. You think that's great, but actually he doesn't. He received his sight and then he followed Jesus along the road. What a great example to us, to all of us who seek for spiritual life. Bartimaeus is about shouting out to Jesus, pleading with Jesus, knowing that Jesus is the one who can bring healing and help to our lives. This was a great and merciful miracle. But Jesus encountered many people who were spiritually blind, who had unresponsive hearts and who refused to recognize him. So our journey with Jesus began when we realized we were blind and on the side of the road, when we were desperate and God had mercy on us. When we consider the necessity of faith, we learn some things about Jesus. Jesus honored faith. The faith of Bartimaeus was very simple. He believed that Jesus was willing and able to help. And the man wasn't questioned about what he knew or believed. Neither was he queried regarding exactly what he meant when he called Jesus Son of David. Neither his doctrines nor his motives were called into account. It was quite simple. Someone in need crying out to Jesus and Jesus responding in mercy. And the man, at the end of it all, became a disciple and followed him. So Bartimaeus praised God by expecting things from God and following God. I think it was William Carey who said, expect great things from God and attempt great things for God. Or maybe he said it the other way around, but the principle's the same. I hope we can discuss this miracle a little bit and think how we are like Bartimaeus or not like him.